Exciting new features are being introduced to JavaScript in 2022. In this video, we'll take a look at the most important changes. Developers can now declare properties directly in the class. Previously, all properties had to be defined in a constructor. If you want to define the radius property of this circle class, you have to do it in the constructor. With the recently introduced changes, this can now be done without a constructor. This is an improvement, as the constructor can now be used for its real responsibilities, to initialize the object and define properties that depend on its parameters. Properties do not need to be assigned a value when declared directly in the class. If you leave a property unassigned, it will have a value of undefined. Await and yield cannot be used when a property is initialized, even if the class is defined in an async or a generator function. Until now, there were no real private fields in JavaScript classes. In most cases, developers would prefix private properties in a class with an underscore to indicate that the field should be private. The problem is that nothing is preventing API users from accessing or modifying the underscore prefixed field outside of the object. The new private fields solve this issue. To declare a private field, you prefix it with the hash symbol. In addition, you can check if a private field exists in an object using the in keyword. Another change to classes is the addition of static blocks. You can now have one or many static blocks in a class which execute once at class creation. Static blocks also have access to the superobject, in addition to private properties and methods. Await could not be used at the top level of JavaScript modules. Until now, the developer had to write an async main function or a self-invoking async function to achieve this. The top level in JavaScript modules is now async by default, which means you can use the await keyword freely. A common thing to do with an indexable object like an array was to get the last item, or an item related to the last item. This was usually achieved by getting the length and computing the last item index by subtracting from it. Indexable objects in JavaScript now support the @, method, which accepts negative values. This means that the last item can now be retrieved in a much cleaner and more readable way. While we're on the topic of indexable objects, arrays now support the findLast and findLastIndex methods. These are very useful, as they work exactly like their non-last counterparts, find and findIndex, the only difference being that they start from the last item in the array and work towards the first. This gives a lot of flexibility and opportunity for performance optimizations. There is also a new feature for regular expressions. The RegExp exec method previously returned only the starting index of a match. We can now get the start and end indices. To achieve that, we have to add the d flag to the regular expression. This is a brand new flag, and it has no other side effects. As the object.hasOwn property method can be overridden by a user-defined abstract data type, developers frequently resorted to using the call method on the object prototype hasOwn property method. This works well, but it is rather wonky and tedious to write every time. So now we have a new shorthand property for the same behavior, object.hasOwn. The last new feature we'll look at is the error calls object. It is very common to catch multiple errors in a try-catch block, and then create a new one. In that case, the developer can now attach the causing error to the new object. This is rather nice, as later you can retrieve the cause error when retrieving this custom one. In addition, debugging tools will be able to utilize this as well. These new features polish and extend key items in the language. In addition, the improvements in class syntax will allow the development of better architectures without using TypeScript, which is a huge improvement. I sure am excited for this. Hope you are as well.